laws are passed by people sitting in ivory towers.
Right.
They have no idea
as to what the reality is.
Excuse me for what I'm saying, but that's a fact. They don't know what's happening on the ground.
Hello and welcome to yet another episode of CNN News 18's podcast Clarity Amidst Clutter. This is your host Sriya Kundu and I'm back with another engaging and intriguing conversation, a dialogue about a very, very socially raging topic right now. And joining me for this conversation is the editor of LawBeat, Miss Sanya Talwar. Welcome to the show, ma'am. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Shreya.
Yes. So, last month itself, Delhi, the national capital, or rather India, was exposed to a rather gruesome and horrific incident, which was Shraddha Walkar's murder case. It was not just another case of murder. It had a lot more to it. The most important point being her being chopped into pieces after being murdered. That isn't just another case of murder. It had way more to it. It had a traumatic past to it. She and her live-in partner, Aftab Poonawala, they had an entire traumatic past to their relationship. She also came from a place where she had been abandoned by her parents because she was in a live-in relationship. And we are talking about this in the 21st century, even in a modern India, where people do claim that they're progressive enough to let go of couples, like let them live the way they want to, let them be in a live-in relationship. Well, in such a scenario, firstly, there have been mentions of a Stockholm syndrome. Like, why did the questions that have been coming to forth are, why did Shraddha not leave when she could have? But the point is, as in when the investigation continued into the case, we have seen that she had reached out to several people at several points in her life when she finally realized that this relationship that she was in, a rather abusive relationship, in fact, which came out to the light once the investigation was on, it wasn't going to work out. And she had reached out a couple of times, not only to people who were close to her, but also people who could help her, which is the police for that matter. But as we have seen, like, not only did she not get help, but she lost her life eventually. And there were a couple of times there were messages that she'd sent across, cry for help, that yes, not only is she in an abusive relationship, but she knew, she was very aware that Aftab was gonna kill her. And well, a lot of times people end up taking this in a way as to, like, you know, it's just another phrase that she's using, that she's going to get killed. You don't understand the gravity of the matter till you actually reach that space, until you're at the edge, and then at the end of it, you fall off that edge. How do you see this entire situation?
So you mentioned the Stockholm syndrome.
Yes.
Well, I'm no psychologist, but I think that the first thing that people need to understand here is what really is Stockholm syndrome.
Right.
What are people talking about when they're referring to this particular issue? Well, the story behind it is that there were a couple of people who were taken hostages.
Right.
Inside a particular bank.
Right.
And the people who put them inside those banks as hostages put them inside these lockers.
Lockers, right.
And you know, throughout that time, while they were inside those lockers, even when they were getting help from outside, they were protecting these people who were holding them hostage. And later on it was revealed, and a lot of people in clinical therapy started getting into this aspect of why this happened and aisa kyun ho raha tha. They were getting helped, and you know, they still didn't take it. They were you know, equipping these people who were troubling them.
Sort of an attachment that they had formed towards their own captors.
Well, it was revealed that this they did out of a defense mechanism that they developed inside their minds, inside their brains, that if we are nice to them, if we care for them, if we love them, or if we support them, we may get out of this traumatic situation.
Right.
We may not get killed. So, well, that is the whole idea behind why domestic abuse victims tend not to reach out for help sometimes, and when they do also, they're not able to get out of the relationship, even when people are telling them, Niklo bahar, why are you in this relationship? And I worked with a couple of people back when I was litigating. I was also volunteering with people on the ground and educating them about legal stuff in villages, and I was going across the outskirts of Delhi. And a lot of stories came out which depicted how women were developing defense mechanisms inside, and they were getting hit one night, and then in the morning they used to go out for a movie with their husband. They used to say, "Ha, theek hai, we'll go for a movie tomorrow. Today he will hit me, tomorrow he will take me out for a movie. So it's fine, it works for me."
So it is actually true when we saw that movie Darlings, that movie had this entire scenario that yes, Alia Bhatt would keep covering up to her own mother for her husband's behavior, that she was getting hit constantly, she was getting abused constantly in her domestic environment, but she would keep covering up because someday not only did she believe that he's going to get better, but she's going to get her loving husband back. Yeah.
So that's called the soothing phase.
Right.
So they look forward to that soothing phase after this particular traumatic event, and they feel like maybe now it's going to last forever.
Right.
So that is the psychology behind it, as much as I know about psychology. But when I look at the Shraddha and Aftab murder case, there are lots of questions that come up in my mind, and I am not also able to answer all of them, to be honest. But yes, one aspect which everybody needs to be aware of is that domestic violence specifically is not always about people reaching out for help and not getting out of the relationship. One has to understand why it happens. One has to understand why people don't reach out for help. One has to understand what are the safeguards that these people can have in place. So I think the conversation around this particular murder, this gruesome murder, is very, very dissociated from the real issues. And there's identity politics being played. There is so many aspects are being put out there which are absolutely irrelevant, and speaks a lot about our society.
Yes. So speaking about society, I think one of the major points that had come into light, and it is extremely unfortunate that this was coming from a rather literate portion of our society, that, okay, so Shraddha was a liberal person. She was liberal enough to go out there, in fact, fight it out with her parents and stay with a man who she was in love with. So she was in a live-in relationship. So if she was in a live-in relationship and she was that open-minded, then why was she not open to therapy? Why did she not go out and, again, the question of why did she not reach out for help? Now, when we talk about why did she not reach out for help, or even bring in the aspect of liberalism about the society, it is, I find it extremely unfortunate that even in the 21st century, there's a portion of the society which I think superficially agrees to being okay with live-in relationships in the first place. Like even today, when there is a live-in couple going out to look for houses on rent, the kind of reactions they get, it's very difficult. It's very difficult. Either you have to post that you're a married couple, or you have to bring in a third person who will be living in with you, or be a guarantor that no, they'll not cause trouble. It is indeed the situation across, and I'm talking about metropolitan cities, not just like cities which are not that well developed when we talk about like being progressive and not come from that orthodox mentality. Even metropolitan cities are not okay with this. So where is this comparison coming from about liberalism being a part of this entire situation? Like, yes, Shraddha should have, probably called out to her friends, or like just gone out and spoken to her parents. And the most interesting part of this case was, nobody was aware of this situation till a very long time. Nobody went out to send in a search party for her before. Like the entire situation came to light now, whereas the entire body was disposed of 6 months back. Where is that coming from? Aren't we as a society also responsible somewhere? Like, why is it that here we have reached an extent of victim blaming to a level that a person who's been murdered and cut up is being brought into the issue, and she's the one who's being, not just blamed, but she's the one who is being put under the spotlight and being questioned as to her character is being questioned. Her character here is being assassinated, as in, why did she not do these things? Where is that coming from?
So about live-in relationships that you pointed out, a large part of the society superficially does agree.
Yes.
But in effect, when we actually put it out there and we figure out whether it applies to our society or not, it's really irrelevant. Whatever exists in the law is only on paper.
Right.
And it's a fact. If you look at the law, I'll point out the legal perspective. The law recognizes live-in relationships now.
Right.
And the law also recognizes that people in the people who are in the live-in relationships, women who are in live-in relationships, can be domestically abused. So the Domestic Violence Act will apply to them.
Right.
But of course, there is some kind of an issue when it comes to other religions where this only applies specifically to Hindus. So that vacuum is still there.
Right.
Where it doesn't apply to, say, the Muslims, or it doesn't apply to the Christians because of this vacuum. And of course, that's another debate altogether, why we need a USCC and all of that. But substantively speaking, the legal dogma says something, and when you come on the ground, the reality, like you say, the laws are passed by people sitting in ivory towers.
Right.
They have no idea
as to what the reality is.
Excuse me for what I'm saying, but that's a fact. They don't know what's happening on the ground. The law recognizes that couples of the same sex can engage in consensual sexual intercourse. But when it comes to same-sex couples trying to find, like you pointed out, a house.
Yes.
Or
even for that matter, like opposite genders also finding a house when they want to live together without being married, it's very difficult. Yeah. So they prefer families to stay on rent, and well, it's a private property, so you can't really say anything that you don't do this or you don't do that. It's their prerogative, but it does reflect a very, very specific kind of a mindset, which we may or may not agree with. And that mindset is still out there, and it's the mindset of the majority.
I won't say that because I don't have statistics with me.
Yes, we can definitely be hopeful about it not being a majority. But more than often, like even people nowadays, like from our background, when they go out and they want to look for flats with their partner, even if they have the blessings of their own parents, the landlords, the brokers out there have an issue. Yes. And I think now after this case, it's going to be even more difficult because people are just going to be more jittery and they're just going to use this as another excuse. That is the sad reality of matters, isn't it?
The truth is that it all boils down to a very, very controversial word which people don't like to use very often, that is patriarchy.
It is true. I mean, it might be controversial. That's the entire point. It might be controversial, but it is the reality of the day. I mean, if not patriarchy, then how do you describe a situation where, like I was just mentioning, a case where, Shraddha Walkar case where she has been murdered, chopped into pieces, and she's lying there out in the forest, her body being disposed. She's being brought out in the daylight and she's being questioned. Her character is being questioned as to right from the beginning, like why did she have to get into a tiff with her parents? Why did she have to move in with her boyfriend? Why did she have to move to a different city? Why did she not send out a cry for help? Everything is about why did she not?
And then of course there are these lists of do's and don'ts which are being given out for women. Which is, I think, this syndrome is a borrowed victimhood of sorts, which the society tends to perpetuate when something like this happens. And what happens in this entire process is the real issue gets lost. A lot of real issues which they are trying to reflect themselves through this particular crime, say identity politics, identity issues, they get sidelined. So where there is nothing, they try to put it and sensationalize it from that perspective.
Right.
So, and that liberalism point that you'd spoken about. Very recently, I was reading about this woman who was a very, very independent, and she was a very successful woman, and she's from the US, and she said that I never considered myself a battered woman till I reached a point where I felt like, okay, if I don't get out now, I will get killed. So that sense prevailed upon her after being hit, being tortured, having a gun to her head for over 2.5 years. And she was an independent woman. She was liberal, she was progressive, everything. But in the end, she realized that perspective of hers, that okay, I can't be somebody who's a battered woman. I'm an independent woman, and I think I'm with a person who is a traumatized person, and only I can fix them.
So the savior complex.
The savior complex. The savior complex. So, I mean, these things are something that the society does not talk about. They want to shove these things under the carpet and bring out things which are not relevant, things which will not add to the discourse, will not in any way protect people from such crimes.
Protect the victims, rather.
Yes. So, yeah, I mean, not to say that men don't face domestic violence.
Of course they do, yes.
But the truth is that statistically speaking, and we don't always rely on statistics when we are talking about social crimes, but statistically speaking, women are more susceptible to domestic violence because of, well, again, patriarchy.
The problem also germinates from the very fact that we end up gendering the victims. Like, a victim should be treated as a neutral, like, identity for its own sake. It's not about a man or a woman. And when you brought in patriarchy, actually, I was thinking of this matter, that we are living in a world when after Aftab has killed Shraddha, he goes back to dating, and not just dating, he's had women at his house after that.
Yes.
How are we safeguarding women? Like, because the next person he met was over a dating app. Now, even if I am on a dating app today, it is impossible to tell what skeletons a man is hiding in their closets. Not just through a conversation over text, but even if I'm meeting them, say, like over a month or two, there's no safeguard. There's no safeguarding mechanism.
Yes.
And imagine the trauma that woman is going through right now when she gets to know about this entire situation from the television, that the man she'd been with is not just like a classic, like, for a lack of word, sociopath, psychopath, but she had been in the same house that the body was kept in, and she was there at that particular point when it was lying there.
Yes.
Is there like a safeguard for women who are out there using dating apps, for that matter?
Legally speaking, the dating apps do have proper verification processes that a person is supposed to go through and everything. But following that, when you decide to meet a person, it is between you and them then. And I don't think the dating app has any particular what do you call it, liability.
Right.
But well, yeah, I mean, when you're talking about safeguards here, I think that the people need to be more scared of the law. They need to be more aware of what could be the consequences of something like this. And you said that maybe people are not, aware of the consequences and what could something like this entail.
Absolutely, because there have been so many cases that are coming up after Shraddha Walkar's murder. It isn't, that's the point, it's not just a relationship between a couple. There have been parents who have killed their children because of their partner that they couldn't agree with. There has been a mother and a son who have killed the man in the family, which is the father and the husband, because they thought that he had an affair with the daughter-in-law. And these are just two cases that I'm naming right now, but there have been several cases that are coming to the front right now after Shraddha's case. Now, is this, I actually wanted to know this, do you think this is just a matter of concern which is coming up right now because the Shraddha Walkar murder case is so, recent and it has come up? Or was this happening for some time and it's just that there is some sort of an ignorance or a lack of knowledge that people have about the consequences? At some level, people should know about legal consequences. They should not just be counseled in relationships and social, social behavior, like we have counseling therapies in schools nowadays. But there should also be a legal counseling where people should be shaped up, people should be brought up in an environment where they're very aware of not just moral values but also legal consequences.
So, law and morality, these are two things that are often separate from each other for a lot of societies. And in India is a classic example for a lot of things. let's talk about live-in relationships for that matter. When you're making somebody aware of the legal consequences of something, you don't necessarily know if, morally speaking, they will agree with you.
Right.
So I don't think that legal awareness per se would solve this particular problem. I think the rot is deep. I think it needs to be intrinsically, embedded in people when they are in school, and they need to be. I'm going back to a more traditional approach. Maybe look at this from the perspective of how relationships should be managed, how people should be taught to say yes and no to even their parents. We were never taught to say no.
The very basics of consent.
Yeah,
yes.
It was always that you have to say yes and you have to be an obedient kid.
Right.
I remember back in school, you would be marked for being an obedient kid. You had to. You had these report cards, and if you were obedient, it was a tick mark. I still remember that, and I was always the obedient one with my teachers. So yeah, it is somewhat of a badge of honor to be somebody who is an obedient person.
Yeah.
Which is a great thing, but you should also know when to say no.
There should be a line in the sand.
These things need to be taught, and these are very intrinsic things that need to start right from childhood. I'm no psychologist, but we were never taught about meditation. We were never taught about how to handle situations, stressful situations back in school.
Right.
We learned with time, we learned with experience. So, and I think parents also have a very huge role to play here.
Right.
It is a collective responsibility, not only of the government, not only of the people, but of individual, units within the society. So that is very important, I think. It is more to do with a holistic approach to things instead of just focusing on the legal aspect or say constitutionalism or just the moral aspect of it. So it's a very holistic approach that needs to be adopted, I think.
I think that's the the thing that you pointed out right while we were having this conversation a few minutes back about the gap that is there for those who are making the law and at the reality, like at the ground level where it is being implemented. That gap probably might be filled with this holistic approach at some point.
Correct.
Right?
Absolutely.
So I think that's a very important point that you've brought it out in this particular case. And yes, I mean, morality is a rather grey area, I feel. It's not a black and white situation.
Correct.
And the quicker people understand this, the quicker, yes, the Indian society in itself is a very traditional society. And while an Aftab Poonawala might come out and say that, yes, there are OTT movies that have, influenced my decision, like he said that he watched Dexter and that's where he got this entire idea from. I think it's very important also to fall back on, focus on these gaps and keep reminding ourselves that morality is a grey area. It isn't about, it isn't a war between nature versus nurture. It isn't about who you're around. It isn't only about who you're around or the background you're brought up in. It is a combination of both. And yes, as important as law, like the legal perspective is, I think you brought out a very important point there as well. Psychology also goes hand in hand. It's a dual role that they have to play together. And with that, we come to an end to this episode. Thank you so much for joining again. And that was Sanya Talwar, the editor of LawBeat, joining us, giving us her insights about this rather horrific, traumatizing and gruesome murder that had come to light and that had pretty much shaken the entire nation. And we will come back with another episode of Clarity Amidst Clutter very soon. Thank you for joining us. This is your host, Sriya Kundu. See you the next time. Thank you.